Hello everyone, and welcome back to this fifth episode of the Mikhail Tal. And today we are going to analyze a game played by Mikhail Tal in 1988 Chicago tournament, whereby he faced another great opponent, Robert Forbes. Now, I don't have much information about Robert Forbes, but as far as I've seen his games, he's also a decent player, and he holds a record of I don't exactly remember, but I think he won 3 to 4 tournaments in a row at that time in his prime. So, yeah, let's focus on this game now. So, Tal is with the white pieces, Robert Forbes is with the black pieces, and if you concentrate on the position, Tal has a nice attacking position, a nice advanced H pawn, the G pawn is ready to push, the G4, the rook is also active on the H1 square, and Tal's pieces are, fairly placed in a, what you can say, good position to attack their opponent king. So let's see what Tal plays here. Again, as the previous game, Tal first creates the imbalance. So Tal plays the move pawn to f5, which is considered as the best attacking move in such positions. Now, what does it do? It basically asks Black a question that, okay, now your g6 pawn is attacked twice. Your g6 pawn is the primary defense of this king on g8. And what do you want to do? Well, you can take it in both ways. Of course, you have to react, or you cannot react. If you don't react, then simply pawn captures on g6, and it's still going to be much more difficult for black to hold. And if you react, then how should you react? Now, there are basically two options here. You can capture with the e pawn. E captures on f5, but then comes knight to d5, and it attacks the queen. It threatens knight e7 check, and there are lots and lots of threats with this knight on d5 now. So queen back to d8, and now comes pawn captures on f5. And again, well, nothing changed actually. The pawn is still on f5. There is still on the pressure on the g6 square, and you cannot actually remove this pressure. If you play bishop f5, then comes knight e7 check, king to h8, knight captures, pawn captures, knight captures, and the position is completely winning for white now. So, of course, you cannot go in this line. And let's say if you try to exchange off this knight for this bishop because you want to capture this pawn with the other bishop. Let's say you play bishop captures on d4, queen captures on d4, and bishop captures on f5. Trying to get a nice defensive structure for the king. But now the bishop on g7 was the most important defender. Now these all potholes are going to be exploited with the white knight. Now comes knight f6 with a check. King h8, now comes pawn captures on g6, and this is almost game over for black. You can play bishop captures, but then comes rook captures on its own with a check. Bishop captures, now comes rook h1. Again, pinning the bishop, threatening rook captures on its own with a checkmate. And there is basically nothing that you can do. You can, capture the knight with the queen, but queen captures king h8, king g8, queen h6. Now there is no defense against queen h7 or queen h8 checkmate. So of course you cannot go in this line either. So what should actually black play here? So I think Robert went through similar thoughts and he said, well, okay, that means that I cannot allow knight d5 at any moment. So let me capture with the g pawn. So he captures with g captures on f5. And now Robert intends to play king h8 in the next move, which he actually does, and try to safeguard his king. So not to the king cannot you should it should not be on the open file. King h8, rook g8, and Robert feels that that defense will be enough for him to at least secure a draw. So Tal plays E captures on F5. That is the best move for white. And now Robert plays King to H8. He says, well, okay, let me first get out of this open file so that no Queen G3 and H6 ideas are possible in future. So Tal plays rook to F1 now with the threat of F6. Tal says, well, okay, no issues. Now the rook's job on H1 is done. Now this pawn on h5 is independent. H6 can be played anytime. Now I need support for this f5 pawn and play f6 as soon as possible. And there are quite a few choices. You cannot play f6, of course, because then the e6 pawn will be hanging. And the other move that comes to our mind is, okay, if this bishop is getting trapped, then why not exchange it? And that is exactly what Robert does in the game. But we will realize why that is not a good solution. So a better option here was to play pawn to e5 and try to close the center as possible, because now pawn to f6 is not possible because you still have pawn captures on d4 immediately. And again, that is not as great because after pawn to f6, you can even capture the f6 pawn with the bishop and then capture on d4. There are lots and lots of options, but I think bishop f6, rook f6. This is still winning for white, but it's not as clear as what Tal actually played in the game. So this move e5 would have prolong the defeat for black, but that was surely the best chance that black had. But Robert chose to exchange off the knight for the bishop here. So he plays bishop captures on d4. And now, of course, if you capture with the queens are traded, and the tension that Robert has is going to relieve little bit. But Tal doesn't want to do that. So Tal plays rook captures on d4 here. He says, well, okay, now I have to keep the tension. And the idea of Robert behind capturing the knight was not only to eliminate the bishop, but also was to play to e5 here. So Robert does play pawn to e5. He says, well, okay, now your rook is pinned. You can go rook to e4, but then queen e3, rook e3. Again, I trade off the queens, and once black anytime not and in this position, once black trades of the queen, it's going to be more or less good for him. But just a general rule for anybody to keep in mind, in any position, if the attacking side trades of the queen, that's bad for him. Okay, so that means that if the defensive side is successful in trading of the queens, the position is slightly going to be less poisonous for them, because the queen is the most dangerous piece in any position, right? So this was Robert's idea here, but Tal again, this is one of the moment in this game where I will ask you guys to pause the video and you can guess the move that Tal actually plays here. And for those who just want to enjoy Tal's brilliancies, Tal plays queen to h6. He says, well, okay, I sacrifice a whole rook here. And what is the idea of Mikhail Tal? If you capture with the pawn, then comes queen f6 with a check, king g8, and pawn to h6, and now there is no defense against queen to g7 with a check. You can very well grab another piece, but finally Tal is the one who is going to win the game at the end. So of course you cannot go here. And the other move that Robert actually plays, queen captures on d4. And now let's see how Tal finishes off the game in style. So Tal plays queen f6 with a check, uh, king to g8, and now the same idea of pawn to h6 doesn't work because of queen to g4, and the queen will be just in time to defend against the g7 mating threat. So Tal says, well, okay, now I'm going to play knight to d5, another very important move in the game. And what is Tal trying to do? Tal is actually trying to deviate the queen from the defense of the g7 square and also the g4 square. So if you capture the knight with the queen, it's actually a poisoned knight, because now pawn to h6 again, that will lead to queen g2 defending the g7 square. But now Tal has this queen g5 intermezzo, and it's not only a check, the king has to go inside, and now pawn to h6 threatening a checkmate. And when the queen was on d4, pawn to e4 would have defended it. But now, because the queen is not on the d4 square, there is no what I can say fruitful defense against queen g7 checkmate. If you play rook g8, queen f6 check, rook g7, queen g7 checkmate, that's another way to lose the game as black here. So, of course, Robert realizes it. He doesn't take the knight. After knight d5, Robert plays a move rook to e8. And again, he wants to defend against this knight e7 checkmate threat. But what do you do for this queen g5 check? So, Tal plays queen g5 check. You can go king f8, but then the knight covers the e7 square. Simply queen h6 check will finish off the game. King g8, now knight f6 check. The king is nicely escorted to the h8 square, and now queen captures on h7 will be a nice little checkmate. So of course you cannot play that. So Robert goes king to h8 here, and now Tal starts his brilliant plan, the final showdown for this game. So Tal plays the move pawn to h6. Tal says, well, okay, let me first go for the g7 checkmate idea. And you again cannot play rook to g8, because then comes queen f6 check, rook g7, queen g7 checkmate, as we earlier saw in I think some different variation. So again, rook g8 doesn't work. So Robert plays the only possible move, pawn to e4. The idea behind capturing the rook with the queen was that this queen will now help in the defense of the g7 square. But now Tal plays a very basic tactical move. He plays pawn to f6. He says, well, okay, I'm blocking your queen from the defense of the g7 square. And what do you do now? You can capture the pawn, but then queen f6, queen g7 will be a checkmate. And there is only one other move that defends against this queen g7 checkmate, that is rook to g8, which was played in the game. Robert does play rook to g8, but now again, feel free to pause the video and find the best possible tactical shot for Mikhail Tal while I'll just have some water till then. Yes. So for those who could do it, it's really brilliant stuff. You have reached a certain level of tactics, and for those who are just to enjoy the tactics here, it's Queen G7 check, sacrificing the queen. And for those who know Mikhail Tal, he is famous for sacrificing the queen itself. So Tal does it in this particular game. We have rook captures on G7, the only option that black has. Now comes H captures on G7 with a check, king to G8, and now comes knight E7. A nice little checkmate with a lot of pieces and material just staring at the black king. And this does give us a nice you know thing to learn from this game, that the number of pieces don't matter. The correctly placed pieces doing their job 100% actually matters in any chess game. And Tal just shows it in this particular example. He sacrifices the queen. He's down a queen. He's down a lot of pawns, but he still manages to win the game on the basis of two pawns and a knight. Even this rook is not even needed in the attack. So yeah, that was another fierce tactical shot from Mikhail Tal, and one of the queen sacrifices that we will be seeing in this series all along. And I think there are a lot of games that have shortlisted just for queen sacrifices from Mikhail Tal, and you guys will just see them, and I hope you all will love them because those each and every sacrifice is what you can say, uh, a brilliancy in itself. So you will just enjoy it as one by one we cover those games of Mikhail Tal. So again, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you see the attack in short, just let's start with the initial disturbance that Tal made with this pawn to f5. And once you start reacting to this, you start with king h8, rook f1, threatening f6. And there is a famous saying from Gary Kasparov that if you are able to attack your opponent sequentially, I think 6, 7 times, you have won the battle. Okay, I mean there is no possibility that your opponent will get defended from your attack unless and until you make a mistake. So that exactly happens here. Bishop d4 was forced by Mikhail Tal. That's the inaccuracy from Robert. And after rook d4, e5, queen h6 is just brilliant stuff. I think this is what Robert missed in this entire calculation of playing e5. And after queen d4, just queen f6 check, king g8, knight to d5 intermezzo. Again, a brilliant deviation tactic. Rook to e8, now comes queen to g5 check, king h8, pawn h6. Again a threat. You defend it with pawn e4. Now comes pawn f6. Again a threat. Again, as I said, sequential threats is what matters. And rook g8, queen g7 check. Rook g7, pawn g7, king g8, and now knight e7. Black finds it too much for the day. Okay. So again, a nice, brilliant stuff from Mikhail Tal. I hope all of you enjoyed it, and stay tuned with our channel. Do subscribe our channel for this series of Brilliancies by Mikhail Tal. We are going to analyze such fierce and much more interesting games in future too. And see you all in the next episode of this particular series that we are covering.